We do have a great program tonight. I'll tell you a little bit about it. We're going to first hear from Dr. Penny Travis, who I will mention something more about her as I formally introduce her. We'll also be hearing from Qais Akbar Omar, who has lived the life that we here only can try to imagine and do what we can to help. And then my friend Roz Rustigian I will introduce, and she's a fellow rug merchant like myself, but has a big heart and a charity or a cause that she works with, and I'll tell you about her. And then we'll be introducing Connie Duckworth, who makes a return visit to Fine Rugs of Charleston, having been here in 2009 when we had a Arzu evening that night. So let me begin with by introducing Dr. Travis. Penny and I did a speaking engagement the other night. That's why we're so friendly. We did last night. Was it last night? It was last Tuesday night to the American Association of University Women, and it was a great evening. But we now join each other again, and let me introduce Dr. Travis. Here you go.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Penny Travis. 5 years ago, in 2009, I came to another Arzu rugs show. I knew about Arzu. I knew that they tried to help Afghan women and their children. Excuse me. And I was kind of at that point in my life thinking, I'd like to go to Afghanistan. Gee, that'd be kind of fierce and exotic and lots of handsome men. And so I came to the show and I saw all their beautiful rugs, but I also saw the pictures of the women and their children, and I heard their stories. And I know that Arzu was trying to sell rugs that night, but they sold me, excuse me, on Afghanistan. So I went home and I got online and I found the American University of Afghanistan, and they were looking for a teacher, science, which I was, and so I emailed them, and a couple weeks later I was hired. I suspect I was the only person that actually applied for the job, considering that it was a war zone. In this country, if you live high on a hill, it means that you're wealthy. In Kabul, it means that you're dirt poor and you have no piped water. And every morning, little boys on donkeys would come down from the hill, get water at the public pump, and then go back up to their homes and deliver water. Most of these children didn't go to school. This is actually a displaced persons camp. These are Afghans who have moved from the south of Afghanistan, particularly Kandahar, because of the fighting, and they've come to Kabul for a better life, and this is the better life. Now, they are considered displaced persons rather than refugees because they're internally displaced, and that means there's no money or support for them from the United Nations. They're Afghanistan's problem. There's some 600,000 displaced persons as of 2014. Here's another woman in a burqa. These women are invisible. It's mostly, at least in Kabul, it's mostly the older women and the uneducated women. It's somewhat different than that in the provinces, which I'm sure Connie can talk to you about. But things are changing in Afghanistan, thank God. More than 1/4 of the government employees are women. Currently, there are 28% women in the Afghan legislature. The Afghan Constitution calls for 25% seats to be reserved for women, so 28% obviously is more than is required. This is where I taught at the American University of Afghanistan. It's an Afghan NGO that was set up in 2006 by with the U.S. aid and also with the blessings of Laura Bush. Since 2006, it's become a real university. When I taught there in 2009 and 2010, they had 20% women in their population, in the school population. The freshman class in 2013 was 50% women. This is one of my very favorite pictures that I took there. Here's a little boy, and he's looking at his sister. His sister has an Easter bonnet on her, and she's got bare legs. And he's saying to her, "You can't dress like that." And she says, "Oh, yes, I can."
Before Afghanistan became what it is now, the country that people always associate with bloodshed, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, terrorists, all of the ugly things, poppy. People used to come, as some of you probably were among those people, who came to Afghanistan on the hippie trail. And they came to Afghanistan to smoke marijuana. You can still do that. They don't have sewage system, they don't have water, they don't have electricity. And since we lost our house during the years of civil war, which I will talk in a minute about it, we had to go and buy a piece of land on a mountain from a squatter and build our house. And during the years of Taliban, we had to burn all our photos because photos were forbidden. One day, a Taliban found out that there was weapon in our house, which didn't belong to us because we moved from our house to other parts to my father's friend's house. They figured out that there was weapon. They found out, and because of that, we had to burn all our video cassettes, all our photos, everything that we had, because if they found something like that, we could be in prison for months, and they could beat you to death. And when I say we moved from our house is exactly on the other side of the mountain. So we came here, and then we had to leave. My father decided to take his family, his 4 daughters, 2 sons, and his wife across the border in the north to Turkmenistan or Uzbekistan, and from there to take all of us to Italy. I was at the time 10 years old, and my youngest brother was 6 months old. So we had to take the road, and we had to pass through the Hindukush mountain, which is where Alexander the Great was stuck here for 3 years, trying to invade that country, and he couldn't. And he had to marry one of the local women in Afghanistan to become family and then pass through. I'm not suggesting that every American should marry an Afghan woman, but you got the point. And we are not going to be in this country for many years probably. So my mother agreed with that, and we camped along the river for 1 week. We had a lot of fun. Every day we fished in the river, shot wild ducks, and at night we made fire and enjoyed, and it was really beautiful. And one day we had flood, and it washed our makeshift tent. And everything we had inside it. And at the same time, we always had the World BBC service on to tell us where is safe and where is not safe to go. Always traveling. It was like a campus for us in the middle of the mountains. And we just hear that there was a civil war just started in Mazar, the province that we were planning to go, and then cross that province and go to Uzbekistan. Or Tajikistan, to one of those countries. So we didn't know where to go. You know, in Afghanistan, the way things work, you go to a village, you probably will find your cousin, first cousin, or second cousin, or third cousin. Or if you don't find anyone, then you make something up. You say, the brother of, the relatives of your sheep went to school with the relatives of my sheep. Therefore, we are cousins. Someone in the village whom we never met before invited us to live with them for a few days, and we ended up living with them for 2 months. But then war came here as well, and we had to leave here to go to central Afghanistan, where the statues of Buddha are standing. Not anymore, though. You saw probably that on TV, that they were blown up by the Taliban. And my mother looked at my dad and said, what if the kids fall down from this cave? So my father crouched on his knees and said, everybody come and stand in front of me. And we stood in a line in front of him, and he said, I have rules for you guys. Rule number 1, when you climb the stairs, try not to fall down. Rule number 2, don't fall down. Fall off the hole. And that was it. And so we ended up living here for 2 months.
I am the co-chair of an organization called the Initiative to Educate Afghan Women. Our founder was moved deeply and profoundly by the events of 9/11, and had to act in order to try and justify herself in this world that she shared with women in Afghanistan. Women were at risk, women were in danger, and women were marginalized and uneducated, cut off from all sorts of resources. The common solutions are economic development, jobs, you can see them all up there. But none of these things can happen without education. And women in particular were forced out of the educational system by the Taliban. And that's just after all of the consequences of war and civil strife, forcing many of the country's people out of the pursuit of literacy. So the dream, if you will, was to educate women so that they could reclaim some of their rightful place in society with the requisite knowledge and the requisite understanding of leadership that would come with that education. Shows how much a woman with motivation, resources, and education can change her own situation and the situation of her village or her city or her culture. So our founder really zeroed in on the need to educate women. Skip to the mission to help create Afghanistan's future women leaders through higher education, leadership training, and career guidance. This is really the only way that these women will claim back so much that has been stolen from them. And we're doing our very, very best to help by partnering with lots of different sorts of groups and individuals. One of the things that we like to do every year is to gather our whole student body together for intercession. We had a magnificent intercession this last year, and it included top leadership training people who, I know one of them just finished a stint at the UN. And they really put our kids through exercises designed to teach them how to listen, how to learn, how to empathize. It was a remarkable experience. And Qais, would you join me? Sure. Would you say a word about the education of your mothers and sisters?
In our family, before, I have 5 sisters. Before they get married, they have to finish they have to get a degree at Kabul University. So that's how it works. With the years of the Taliban, since the women were not allowed to go to school, I had a carpet factory, and for 8 hours the women work in my factory, and at the end of the day, my father and my mother taught all these women the school subjects for 6 years. So that's how we tried to do it. And as for my education, I went to school. I was on 3rd grade when the Civil War happened, then the Taliban, and then I went to Kabul University for 2 years, and then I came to Boston University, where I was enrolled in creative writing and still am, and then I had to teach as well. So when I went to class, the students, I asked my students, I had to teach a class of creative writing undergraduate. They asked me I asked them about their education, then they asked me about my education. I told them that I went to school for 3 years and then 2 years of university, and here I am teaching you. They were very confused. But then when I told them that I got into Harvard, then they took me very seriously.
I am not a rug merchant. In fact, when I started this enterprise, after my first trip to Afghanistan in January of 2003, as a member of a State Department delegation to help ensure that women have a seat in the new Afghanistan, I was the business representative. I had been in New York for 9/11. I have 4 children. I live in suburban Chicago, and I had been in investment banking for 20 years. I drove home, and that was the end of my banking career because I felt that it was time for me to do something else. And fate always knocks at very strange times. And shortly after, in the early spring of 2002, I was invited to join this State Department commission as the business representative, and had the opportunity to meet with dozens of widows and small children who at that time were the ages of my children. And they were living in a blown up Soviet cinder block building with no heat, no water, no facilities of any kind. And that's what hooked my heart. So I came back and said, well, I'm the business representative. I'm going to do something in business. And after going down a couple blind alleys, as Rob said, the rug industry is the single largest legal export market, export product. And what I wanted to do was to identify a true export product, not charity product, not product that, you know, the beaded change purse or the little silk scarf, which we all buy when we're traveling. So I founded Arzu, which means hope. So when I got to Kabul, it looked like Berlin after World War II. And so I, again, thinking, where's the greatest need? There was a lot of money pouring into Kabul from many organizations. So not knowing any better, again. It's always great when you don't know what you're getting yourself into, because otherwise sometimes you think, well, gosh, I maybe wouldn't have thought about doing that. But I packed up and moved out to Bamiyan province, the home of the former Bamiyan Buddhas, because that is one of the poorest, most underserved areas in Afghanistan. It's also the home of mostly displaced persons who had gone across the border into Pakistan when the Taliban came through. So I founded Arzu as a way to employ women in weaving rugs fairly. It was something they could do in their home. And the deal with Arzu, and again, I just made this up as we went along, was that we looked at the local labor rate and we said, we'll pay you this plus a 50% quality incentive bonus. And in exchange for that, your male head of household had to thumbprint, because everybody was illiterate, men and women, 100% illiterate. Thumbprint our social contract, and the deal was three things. All kids, girls and boys, into school, which the government was reopening. Number two, all women, adult women in the household, get released for literacy classes that we set up. And number three, the pregnant women had to be released to our team. We had a four-wheel drive vehicle, a driver, and a lady chaperone to be picked up and taken for pre- and postnatal care, and for take the babies for immunizations. That was a deal. You want the extra money, you have to do these things. So from our starting point, I'll just give you a couple of numbers. We started with 30 weavers, and now we employ 300 full-time. Each of these tend to support entire family groups. We've also created about another 300 jobs for women. We have about 175 unskilled women, because our weavers are highly, highly skilled. And so we built a 2-story loom room as one of our buildings. And our first commercial project won Best Rug of 2009 by Interior Design Magazine, something we're extremely proud of. And this is a very, very special collection. We basically approached Stanley Tigerman and Margaret McCurry, who are in the Chicago area, and asked if they would design a new pattern and gift it to Arzu. Well, they did. In fact, they designed 2 patterns. Not only that, but Stanley, who is in his mid-80s and just donated all his archives to the Art Institute, actually picked up the phone and called his friends and said, you got to do this. This is really wonderful. And it was just like in Devil Wears Prada, because I'm sitting there in Stanley's office, and he yells out to his secretary, Moira, get me Frank. He means Frank friggin' Geary, okay? So 5 minutes later, I've got Frank, and he picks up the phone and chit-chat for a minute and then said, okay, Frank, you got to do this. Okay, Frank's in. You can call his office. And that's the Frank Geary rug right there.
No, the point I want to make is that over there we have set up, there's 10 or 12 of the the designs in a size 3x5, right at 3x5, 4x6, and they're all specially priced. Everything will go to Arzu, nothing will go to Fine Rugs. In true fact, that breaks my heart, but fact is, when we have an evening like this, the spirit of doing good and trying to help, the way to help is to take one of those rugs home with you and use it in somewhere in your house that you really see occasionally and can remember this evening. We have a couple people here who have actually bought rugs at our last one, and they still conjure up memories of the stories that you've heard here tonight. Please enjoy some networking and get to know each other and talk to Qais or any of my. Let me introduce some other friends of mine. This is my friend Alex Zahir, who has been with me every time I go to Afghanistan because, as you might can tell, I don't speak the language. Richard Ringrose is a very good friend of mine. We've traveled to Shanghai just recently, and we're quite close. Stand, Richard, please. Hello. Richard and Claire came from England for tonight. Hello. And then Stephen Landrigan, right here, came with Qais and with Roz from Boston, and they're here tonight in support of these efforts.